Back to Resilience Strength Recovery. I'm Maura Lippert. I'm a holistic nutritionist, functional medicine health coach, and a person currently waking up and dealing with the world as we all are. This is part one of a two-part series. I'd like to discuss my wake-up journey, and I hope you appreciate it, and I hope you get something out of it. Please do leave a comment if you have any suggestions and questions or recommendations for future videos. And also please do like, share, and subscribe. And also hit that little notification bell. I really appreciate it. So waking up, what does that mean? I've been a meditation teacher for many years, and in Buddhism, waking up certainly means full ascension or enlightenment. What I'm referring to is waking up to the truth. And it's been I think we've been lied to for many centuries, but this particular past period of a few decades has been particularly unhealthy for us. And please keep an open mind and know that I'm not judging anyone. This is my journey and my experience. I know that I've been awake a lot of my life. I'm a very intuitive person. I'm very grateful for that. And just a tip on intuition, if you're trying to develop your intuition, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the better it works, the stronger it gets. When I was a little girl, I had a number of experiences of communication with energies, beautiful energies, some not so great energies in haunted house type situations. And being a very sensitive person and an intuitive, I probably absorbed and heard and felt more than some people. How these things come to me, or experiences come to me, are mainly in the area of feelings. Sometimes I'm clairaudient or clairvoyant, and often it's in feelings. Some of the things I experienced as a little girl, I think, set me up for my life now. And I had the benefit of having very strong, wise women in my life. My mother, Heather, was one of them. She died when I was 14, which was a whole experience in itself, devastating, needless to say. I had an aunt who was my mother's best friend, Aunt Grace, who was extremely gifted as well, and was a real matriarch in her family. And both our mothers were very close. Both those women were very close, and I'm close to Grace's daughters now, who are also very gifted, and I love them dearly. Important women, strong women, have been really key in my life. My dad was also a very spiritual man, and I believe sensitive. I have family members who are the same, and lots of friends. And maybe you know what I mean, and maybe you don't. At any rate, I'll speak about how all this relates to what we're going through. I had a vision, and I'm not exactly sure when it was. It came to me either in a dream or while I was awake, but it was very, very significant. And I was an older woman. I had it a long time ago. I'm in my 60s now. I'm 63. This vision came, I think, probably 30, 40 years ago. And I had a vision of walking in a very barren landscape with a backpack and supplies for camping on my back, and my son was with me, and my grandson. And I love them both dearly, and they're really important people to me. I'm sure there were other people with me, but that's who I remember. And we were clambering through mountains, and it was very difficult. And the word Armageddon came across my consciousness during the vision. And I was pretty shaken by it, and I told my children about it. They're both grown up now, 40 and 37. And sometimes at Christmas, I'd give them solar self-winding radios or emergency water filters, and I just say, here's an Armageddon gift. Hopefully never needing to use it. Of course, you can use it for camping too. And when all this talk started in early 2019, late 2019, around the scary flu, I'll call it, please know that on many channels, one has to be very careful about the wording of things because algorithms can cause a rejection or a platform being taken down. So I may write some words out, or I may use other wording for it. So the scary flu that we've all been dealing with for the last 18 months. There was talk about it in, I think, September of 2019. In November of 2019, I believe I had it. And I'm a very healthy person. I look after myself. But when I get sick, I get quite sick. And this was a flu that I couldn't shake, a cold/flu that I couldn't shake. It was with me for about 6 weeks. It was in my lungs a lot. And eventually I got better. I only had to take a week off work. And some people have had it much worse, of course, but I was grateful to have had it. And I closed the blind, but I still look like I've got a bit of a halo. So yes, I believe I had it in late 2019. And I'm grateful that I had it because now I have antibodies to it. Like any flu virus, we build antibodies when we come in contact with it. And sometimes we're sick and sometimes we have no symptoms. At any rate, as talk about it started to heat up, I sort of took note about how it seemed to be bigger than previous things. Of course, there was MERS and different SARS was out and in years ago, and some of them were quite harmful to people, but this seemed to be different and bigger. And I was concerned, of course, for my family and my friends and myself. So I started watching a lot of news, which is what I usually do to get caught up on what's happening in the world, mainstream media. I'm Canadian, so I watch a lot of our national broadcaster, Canadian Broadcasting System, and other American media. And as things got worse, I said to my son, there's going to be a lockdown. And unfortunately, I was right. I think he thought I was nuts. And as they started talking about the big V, it was meaning the sickness. It was heating up, and the government was having press conferences every day and bringing a lot of attention to it. And the word bioweapon kept on coming up for me. So fast forward, I kept on listening to the news probably for about 2 weeks, and I had some fear about it. I'm not a fearful person at all, but I don't like uncertainty when we don't know what we're dealing with. And being a medical health professional, that was concerning to me. And of course, I was concerned for my children and grandchildren and friends and family. I watched a lot of, as I say, a lot of news, a lot of press conferences. And I watched a lot of different channels, and they were all saying the same thing. And there was just a sense of, this is really strange. They're overreacting. This is every year in the fall we get new flu or cold viruses. And why is this one different? Some of the footage looked kind of fake to me, and I hate to say it because there were a lot of deaths, and I feel my heart goes out to anyone who lost anyone, any family or friends or co-workers from this scary flu. But it seemed, from a medical perspective, a big overreaction. And I kept on wondering, what's behind this? Why are they doing this? What's behind this? At the same time, I went out for a walk with a few friends, had a talk with a few friends. My naturopath, who's also a friend, she and I had a great conversation, and I raised some of my doubts, and she gave me her take on it, and so we were on the same page. I also went for walks with other friends, and a couple of very dear friends that I walked with enlightened me to some news that was coming out, obviously not in mainstream media, about how this might be an overreaction, this might be a bioweapon. So I started looking at some of those resources. And I started realizing that the mainstream media, the talk shows I was listening to at night, seemed to have an agenda. So I think one of the smartest things I did was to turn off the mainstream media. I don't know why. I didn't know why at the time, but I believed they had some kind of agenda, and I believed that there was something behind this that I didn't know what it was, but it wasn't making sense. None of it was making sense. The lockdown didn't make sense. The number of deaths they had even didn't justify the lockdown. In the past, when there's this kind of an illness, we quarantine the sick, and the healthy stay active and protect themselves and protect the sick and protect the elderly with whatever means are necessary. But the healthy stay working. They stay leading life as before, obviously taking consideration for not getting the illness or spreading the illness. At any rate, none of this was making sense. I have medical health professionals in my family, and they were sort of questioning it a little bit too. And so I started to shift my thinking from being afraid. No, that's not true. There was still some fear, but there was some anger as well that we were being lied to. And again, a lot of this came up intuitively. I wasn't sure where it was coming from, but I knew that we were probably being lied to. In around April or May, I realized that some of the positioning of people in government was being manipulated. So, for example, my research led me to believe that then the 45th President of the United States, Mr. T, was making some sound decisions around this. And at some point he opened the economy back up. And I thought that was a great idea. At the time I couldn't stand him. I don't hate anybody, but I really disliked him. And a friend of mine said, "Why do you dislike him?" And I thought, well, he's a oaf, he's a goof, All the things that the mainstream media had told me about him, I believed. And a lot of the things mainstream media told me about everything so far, I had believed. I started to investigate the man and thought, okay, maybe I need to look at this. And I read his executive orders on usgov.com, I believe it is, or us.gov. And his first executive orders was to put a huge amount of money and a special military force, law enforcement, into stopping human trafficking, including minors. And I thought, wow, this man or his administration are really wise. I also listened to some of his speeches, not on mainstream media platforms, and I realized he's actually quite a bright guy. I started following him on Twitter. Why I'm raising this is because this is part of the huge lie. And Canadians in general can't stand the man. I have a lot of friends who cut me off because I started saying he's making a lot of sense and I actually like him. And I lost family in the long run, I lost family because of my views. And I wasn't just being obedient Canadian and doing what I was told. I decided to question things, which I think is very healthy. Am I skeptical? Am I a conspiracy theorist? As I said in my last video, and please do watch my first video if you have time. It's pretty short, and it's an introduction to what this channel is all about and what future videos will be about. I think you'll like some of them. And please, again, give me some ideas of what you're looking for. And eventually I'll do some lives and we can chat on the spot in the moment. Getting back to the beginning, by the summer of 2020, I had sort of connected some people and connected with some people who were like-minded. And we called ourselves the Wake Up Soul Group or something like that. And we'd meet and hugging, being together, and having meals together. Lockdowns lifted, and then again that was supposedly okay, but we weren't really paying attention. We were being smart, but I wasn't stopping my life. I did stop working for the first lockdown, and that's part of the second. I saw some people virtually, and none of that made sense, but again, I didn't want to get in trouble, quote unquote. So I saw my clients, but a lot of the work I do is physical, including muscle testing, so seeing them virtually is not the same, but at least I was able to see some people. My bank account took a massive hit. In 2020, I made about less than a quarter of what I made the previous year. Of course, I'm not the only person who's had a devastatingly horrible hit to their business. So there was some anger. I started to read more and more about wise, valid, and well-educated doctors and nurses and naturopaths and scientists, virologists, talking about the efficacy of the test, for example, begins with a P. The CDC, it's either the WHO or the CDC, have since said the test is useless, basically. And I believe that the test was ramped up in cycles to make anybody positive. There was an African president who did a test, the P test, on, I think, a guava. He sent in a test on 3 inanimate objects, or one was an animal, and they all came back positive. The maker of the test, Dr. Carey, Mullis, I believe, actually came out in early 2020 and said, this test isn't valid for this purpose. This is a great test, but not for this purpose. I don't recommend that it be used. It's very interesting how a little while later he was found dead in his home. I don't know if it was a heart attack or whatever, but it's very, that's sort of interesting. He was speaking out and then he was found dead, which has happened to a lot of people who have been speaking the truth that I find out in the last decades, but certainly since this has all started. Our immune system needs input. To stay home with a mask on, never going out, or wearing a mask when you go out, never allowing yourself to have any input, constantly using hand sanitizer, which does ruin a lot of our skin microbiota, and it can ruin the gut microbiota. Too much of it. There's a carcinogen in most hand sanitizers called triclosan. So be careful. Get a healthy hand sanitizer if you use one. All of those things keep our immune system sort of asleep, or sort of a little asleep. Our immune system needs input. Our immune system needs constant reminders to build antibodies to protect ourselves. So I'm concerned about the folks that I hear about who have hardly gone out, not had any input, not had any interaction with people. We haven't been hugging. Well, I have, but happily. Um, and, staying away from people, the distancing, the masks. I mean, the best analogy I have for the MASKS is if you were to try to keep a mosquito out and build a chain link fence in your backyard. The micron of the V is much smaller than the weaving of any mask. I also believe that there's a control aspect to wearing it. And, Dr. F in the United States said, oh no, we wouldn't do that. And all of a sudden in July of 2020, we're all told to do it. It was ridiculous. And I have a lot of clients, and I have anxiety that can be triggered by not being able to breathe properly. Not to mention people with asthma, not to mention pregnant women shouldn't be wearing them. It can affect the baby. There's so much data to prove that these are useless, and very little, if I haven't seen any, to prove that they help. My dad was a heart surgeon, very, very accomplished heart surgeon. He was chief of surgery at St. Mary's Hospital in Kitchener. And he always said to me, I wear a mask so I don't infect the wound. And that makes a lot of sense. But wearing a mask for the purpose that we've been told, I think, has an ulterior dark motive. It's about making us obedient. Babies can't see our smiles. Deaf people can't read our lips when we're speaking. The communication is not good. And it stops us being close. This distancing and the MASKs make us distant from other people. So all of this I was questioning. I was doing a ton of research. I don't think whoever created this, well, I know I'm going to talk next video about who I believe that is. You might want to look up World Economic Forum. You might want to look up Agenda 2021. At any rate, I think that I know that there is a very unsavory purpose behind this. And you've probably heard of Reset, a great one. That's not quite the title, but I think you can figure it out. You might want to look up that. I believe that's behind it. At any rate, I will go into that further. So in the fall of 2020, when we were supposed to be, letting go of all this stuff, along comes another put us in our house and close the door and stop work, etc. And again, it didn't make any sense. So I'm very angry about it. And I want to end this with hope, because people like myself who were at home investigating, researching, I had 18 months, well, not a full 18 months, but I had a lot of time at home by myself to do good research. It's very difficult to do good research. If I can give you one tip about that, it's download a browser that doesn't have all the algorithms to filter the results that they want you to see, not what you're looking for. Otherwise, if you use the main browsers, you end up having to go to page 30 or 40 to find what you're looking for, and people give up. I use DuckDuckGo, and there's also a really good one called Brave. There are a number of good ones. So my suggestion is to maybe, if you're doing research, to use one of those browsers. The hope is that people are waking up. You may not see it in mainstream news. And by the way, if you're listening to the mainstream media, know that they're owned by 6 large companies, and many of those are nefarious, have nefarious people behind them. A lot of them are drug companies. I'm not saying all drug companies have been bad forever, but big pharma is getting too big. And behind that ownership is 1% of the population that has 99% of the wealth. And they're very rich families, and they have been basically creating the agenda for the mainstream media to spout out. There are lots of videos where the videographer tapes different channels and the same talking points are coming out as if they've been written for them. And apparently that's what happens at 4 o'clock in the morning. They get the information that they're supposed to spout out that day, and it's not the truth in many cases. So I advise you, as your friend, I'd recommend that you cut off the mainstream media and start listening to other media. There's, in Canada, there's REBEL. There's, in the United States, OAN, Right Side Broadcasting. In Canada, True North is good. I'll probably have a video where I get more into great resources, and I am building a website where you can actually go and click on the links to find resources. I also recommend that you keep an open mind. I'm sure that some of what I've said has angered some of you, many of you, I hope not, but the thing is, when we hear something and it really triggers anger or something deep inside us, I think it's a really good idea to keep an open mind, and rather than right away poo-pooing it, say, could that be true? And if it's not a truth for you, great. I don't ask you to believe me. Just look into these things, please. The last thing we want to do is just do everything we're told, because that's what they want us to do. Again, the mainstream media doesn't cover it, but there are millions and millions and millions of protests, and people protesting all over the world. London, England, Australia, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Victoria, New York, all over the United States, all over the world, huge protests. In fact, in Italy, I saw a great video of, they have a little paperwork that you have to present if you want to go into a restaurant or a store. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. And the Italians won't put up with it. So rather than going into a restaurant, and of course we know food and wine is very big over there. I've been there. They love their food. And cheers to my Italian friends. The point is, they brought their picnic baskets and they sat on the street and on the sidewalks in front of restaurants. Hundreds, thousands of people all over Italy, perhaps millions, and had picnics with their family in front of the restaurants. They didn't go into the restaurants because they didn't want to fall into the tyranny. They didn't want to get the necessary procedure, so they got their little card. We'll be talking about that procedure later. I'm talking about the... So I think I'll end here. I have a date with my children, with my daughter and grandchildren, to go for a hike. So I love you guys, and again, please like, share, hit the notification bell, and subscribe. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers in 6 months, so we'll see. And do share this information. I hope you get something out of it. My motivation to do this is to help spread the truth. And there are a lot of great truthers out there. There's a lot of great videos. Please consider looking into it and learning the truth, unless you've already started, in which case, congratulations. You're on your way. That is the hope. That is the hope. People are looking into things. People are standing up. People are saying, no way, not going to happen. We are taking our sovereignty back. And that's what I'm doing. See you soon. Bless you all.